In my case, I was 5 weeks pregnant. There was no heartbeat, and no ectopic pregnancy is viable. And that's so important because the mother needs care immediately. But unfortunately, women's healthcare has been subject to the worst politic fear mongering that you can experience. And so they had actually been receiving, these healthcare providers had been receiving pro-abortion lobby ads to the tune of millions of dollars being spent on these ads that were threatening and scaring doctors away from helping women, saying that they could lose their license, they could go to jail. In fact, in the room, I had nurses and doctors showing me these advertisements saying that they felt uncomfortable because they didn't want to go to jail. They wanted to help me, but they felt like they couldn't do anything. So I literally was laying on the table reading them the law. And it dawned on me as I was sitting there with my husband, this is what women are experiencing because of the fear mongering around women's healthcare. And it has to stop. The left absolutely played a role in making sure that doctors and women were scared to seek out the help that they needed. And so I think that this is a wake-up call. My story should really bring forward the national conversation that's long overdue about the lack of maternal health care. And really, I think it's important that we highlight that doctors aren't to blame, women aren't to blame. We need to get the politics out of women's healthcare.
This is Representative Kat Kamik, a Florida Republican who nearly died from an ectopic pregnancy because doctors were afraid to treat her under her own party's abortion ban, who's decided that the real villain here isn't the restrictive law that almost killed her, it is the left for having the audacity to warn people that restrictive abortion laws would put women's lives at risk. Kamik experienced exactly what reproductive rights advocates said would happen under these draconian abortion bans. And her takeaway isn't, hey, maybe we shouldn't have passed these dangerous laws, but rather, how dare the Democrats accurately predict what would happen? The cognitive dissonance here is staggering. So here's what happened. In May of 2024, Kamik went to the emergency room with what turned out to be an ectopic pregnancy, which is a life-threatening condition where the embryo implants outside of the uterus. The doctor told her bluntly, if this ruptures, it will kill you. She needed a shot of methotrexate to terminate the non-viable pregnancy and save her life, but it turns out that doctors were hesitant to provide this life-saving treatment because they were terrified of violating Florida's 6-week abortion ban, which had just taken effect weeks earlier. So what did Kamik have to do? She literally had to pull up the law on her phone to convince medical professionals to save her life. She even tried calling Governor DeSantis' office, the same DeSantis who signed this very law, but got no response from him. So for hours, she lay there arguing with hospital staff while her life hung in the balance. And who does she blame for this nightmarish situation? Not the Republican legislators who passed the ban, not DeSantis who signed the ban into law, not her own party that has spent years attacking reproductive rights, and certainly not herself for her central role in the fight against those reproductive rights, which we'll get to in a moment. No, she blames the left for fear-mongering. As she put it, the left absolutely played a role in making sure that doctors and women were scared to seek out the help that they needed. I mean, I'm sorry, but what? This is like setting your own house on fire and then blaming the neighbors for yelling fire and calling the fire department. The fear-mongering that she's referring to was reproductive rights advocates warning exactly what would happen under these laws. That doctors would be too afraid to provide emergency care because of vague language and harsh criminal penalties. And guess what? They were right. Now, as I alluded to before, Kamik isn't just any Republican. She is the co-chair of the House Pro-Life Caucus. She spent her entire congressional career voting to restrict reproductive rights and attacking abortion access. Her voting record reads like a greatest hits of anti-abortion extremism. She co-sponsored a bill to ban abortion nationwide after 15 weeks. She led a discharge petition to force a vote on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. She voted for measures to eliminate federal funding for abortion. Just this January, after her own near-death experience, she voted for H.R. 21, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, which passed the House and includes criminal penalties for healthcare providers. This is someone who has made a career out of making it more and more difficult for women to access reproductive health care. And when she became a victim of her own policies, she had the audacity to blame the people who tried to stop those policies in the first place. And let's be crystal clear about who actually passed Florida's abortion ban. It wasn't the left, it was the Republican-dominated Florida legislature, led by Republicans with a supermajority in both chambers. Ron DeSantis, a Republican, signed it into law in April of 2023. So look, I get the desire to blame the evil communist Marxist Democrats, but find me a single Democrat who was involved in the passage of the very legislation that nearly left this Republican lawmaker dead. I'll make it easy for you. You can't. Every step of this process was controlled by Republicans. They wrote the vague language, they imposed the harsh criminal penalties, up to 5 years in prison and $5,000 fines for doctors. They created the unworkable legal landscape that a report from Physicians for Human Rights said left doctors afraid to provide methotrexate because it was considered an abortive agent. This isn't some abstract policy debate, it is about real women's lives. As the ACLU's Keisha Mulford pointed out, the delays Kamik experienced are not the result of advocates defending abortion access, they are a direct consequence of Florida lawmakers passing extreme, confusing, and politically motivated abortion bans. And here's what makes this even more infuriating. Kamik acknowledged in her interview that she realized the privilege that she had in this situation. She asked what happens to women who don't have a car, what happens to the women who don't have their doctor's cell phone number, hell, do they even have a doctor, what happens to them? To which I would reply, exactly. What happens to women who aren't powerful Republican congresswomen with connections? What happens to women who can't just call the governor's office? What happens to women who don't have the political clout to eventually convince doctors to save their lives? Those women suffer. Those women die. They're forced to travel out of state or to carry non-viable pregnancies to term. But instead of using that realization to reconsider her position on reproductive rights, she doubled down. She's still co-chair of the pro-life caucus. She's still voting for anti-abortion legislation. She's still supporting the very policies that nearly killed her. And worst of all, she keeps insisting that what happened to her wasn't an abortion, as if using different terminology changes the medical reality of what happened. Whether you call it terminating an ectopic pregnancy or emergency abortion care, it is still reproductive health care that was delayed because of anti-abortion laws. Even after her experience, Kamik told the Wall Street Journal that she, quote, would stand with any woman, Republican or Democrat, and fight for them to be able to get care in a situation where they're experiencing a miscarriage or an ectopic pregnancy. But apparently, she'll only fight for them after they've already been endangered by the laws that she continues to support. Pretty convenient to be able to spew out empty rhetoric only after you've ensured that women are put in those positions in the first place. But this is the fundamental problem with these Republican abortion bans. They are written by politicians, not doctors. They include vague exceptions that might sound reasonable on paper, but that create chaos in practice. When you threaten doctors with prison time and a loss of their medical licenses, they are going to err on the side of caution, even when women's lives are at stake, as Kamik knows all too well. Democrats did not create this confusion, Republicans did. Reproductive rights advocates didn't make doctors scared, the threat of criminal prosecution did. The left didn't endanger Kamik's life, the abortion ban that her own party passed did. As one expert put it, having these vague laws is like playing Russian roulette with women's lives, and when Kat Kamik pulled the trigger and nearly lost, she looked around and blamed everyone except the people who loaded the gun, she and her own Republican colleagues. The lesson here isn't that Democrats were fear-mongering about abortion bans. The lesson is that they were absolutely right. And women like Kat Kamik are living proof of the deadly consequences of Republican extremism on reproductive rights. So maybe instead of blaming the people who tried to warn her, she should thank them for being right. Before you go, if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more and support independent media, please subscribe to this channel. The subscribe button will be right here on the screen. But second, the reality is that we are now in a political environment where this administration can lean on any of the social media platforms to suppress certain voices if they don't like critical coverage. That means my longevity here is in the hands of a few tech billionaires who are already making it clear that they are willing to cater to this administration. To that end, signing up for my newsletter is a way for me to reach you directly if that ever becomes necessary. I'll put the link right here on the screen as well, so please sign up. It's free, but there's also an option to do a paid subscription if you'd like to support me and my team. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching.